Boxing Today.
Gerald Washington, Heavyweight Boxing. Please watch Mr. Heavyweight Boxing Today.
Hey, what's up, man? This is Chris the Nightmare Ariola, and you're watching Mr. Boxing Today.
Heavyweight boxing fans, what's the deal?
Heavyweights of the 1970s era. I'm only counting things that happened between 1970 and 1979. Nothing that happened in the late 60s or the early 80s. Just strictly 70 through 79. But before my top 10, I'm going to give an honorable mention of another 10 fighters that didn't make the list. So these guys are probably 11 through 20. Before I get to that list, though, let me give some shine to two of the best amateur fighters in the decade of the 70s. Teofilo Stevenson, he won the 72 Olympics, 76 Olympics. Val Barker, trophy winner in the 72 games. Rest in peace, Howard Davis Jr. He won the Val Barker in 76. But Stevenson was a very good amateur fighter. They were trying to get him and Ali to fight after the 76 games. It didn't happen. So let me give some shine to him. Let me also give some shine to Igor Vysotsky. He fought, this video is actually on YouTube. He fought Ali in a sparring session in the Soviet Union. He was, 1978. Ali says he was very tired in that fight. He did not want to do it or do the exhibition, but he did it anyways, followed through with it. He didn't want to do it, but even in that little session, I'm reading comments under it, people saying that, he could have did that to Ali or, it was an old Ali, man. It was 1978. I mean, shit, Spinks ended up beating Ali in a professional fight. So Vysotsky, I mean, who knows? He kind of fought in that Quarry, Frazier type of style. But in that little footage they had, Ali put his high guard up and he was really not doing much. He'll just punch in spurts. But it really wasn't much there. Vysotsky did look decent in it, looked strong, looked durable, had strong legs, good combination punching, little small, durable guy. But he did beat Teofilo Stevenson twice, and he knocked him out once. There is some footage on YouTube of the 1973 Geraldo Cordova Cardin tournament, and it's like probably like a minute clip, of the Stevenson Vysotsky fight. But he has 2 wins over Stevenson, the only guy Stevenson didn't beat in the amateurs, so got to give shine to those 2 gentlemen, all right? So let's kind of go with the honorable mention, the 11 through 20. I'm going to have Mac Foster. He was 8-6 in the decade. He was still a formidable guy. Went 15 rounds with Ali, lost to Bob Stallings, lost to Bugner, lost to Stan Ward and Henry Clark. He's about 6'2", 210, twilight of his career, but he was still around in the 70s, formidable for the most part. Floyd Patterson, he's another guy. He was 9-1 in the decade. We know that Floyd's best years was late 50s going into the early 60s, through the 60s, so that was his era. But he was 9-1 in the 70s. Lost to Ali. I thought his big win was the win against George Chuvalo. Next guy, number 18, George Chuvalo, 6-footer, 221 pounds, great all-time chin. His losses in the decade were to Ali, Ellis, and Foreman. I thought his best win in the decade was to a past prime Cleveland Williams. Number 17, Dwayne Bobbitt. His best wins were Larry Middleton, Weaver, Scott Ledoux, Chuck Wepner, Bunny Johnson. Dwayne Bobbitt was 48-4 in the decade. He was a guy that his chin couldn't hold up, man. He was a great amateur. I believe the fight between Bobbitt and Teofilo Stevenson is it still the highest watched Olympic fight. It was during that time. I don't know if it still is, but he beat Larry Holmes twice in the Olympic box office. One of the fights is on YouTube. The fights actually go to the Olympics. That one is on YouTube. Howard Cosell was giving Larry Holmes shit in that fight, but Holmes kind of deserved it in that fight, man. But his losses, the Norton lost, the 1-round KO, the Cali Konitz lost, the John Tate blowout, the George Chaplin loss. It was just, his chin, man. He was a good boxer. He had good technique, good skill. He started off 40-0. Then he had the loss to Norton. You probably could say it was debatable, because he got up and the ref was going to let him continue. Then he kind of took a step. The ref didn't really think he was able. Then he stopped the fight. John Tate got blown out. So he would get blown out, man. It was just his chin, man. His chin just couldn't hold up. He's actually a Minnesota guy. He's from the state that I live in. I know him and Scott Ledoux. I remember reading about this when I was in elementary school. But him and Scott Ledoux did about 15,000, man, where the Minnesota Vikings used to play in the 70s. It's where the Mall of America is right now. Some of you heard of the Mall of America in the Twin Cities. That's where that fight was at. But Dwayne Bobbitt, man, he was a good, 6'3", 215-pounder. He has solid skills, just didn't have the chin. Number 16, I'm gonna go with Kali Konitz. He 6'1", 211-pounder. High guard, walk you down. If you want to see something funny, probably one of the funniest things I've seen when I was looking at the 70s, man, is the stare down Kali Konitz had with Denton Ruddick. That fight is on YouTube. These dudes are in the middle of the ring, staring each other down through the national anthems. It's just these two guys. Everybody else is in the corner and away from these guys. Just these two guys staring each other down for about 2 minutes straight, 3 minutes straight, 2 minutes straight. Pretty funny stare down. But he had the 2 losses to Jerry Coetzee. One of the fights is on YouTube. Coetzee was an awkward bastard to fight, but Konitz was a high guard type of guy. He was 19-4 in the decade. The Bobbitt win and the Richard Dunn win. The Bobbitt win kind of got him on, and then the Richard Dunn win. So I have him at number 16. Number 15, Oscar Benavena. He passed away in 1976. 6 feet, 205-pounder. His best work was probably late 60s going into the early 70s, but he was 18-4 in the decade. His big wins, in my opinion, were Alvin Lewis and Louis Pires. So then his losses to, we had one to Pierce and one to Lau, Patterson, and Ali. I believe he was Ali's second. Was he a second fight after Ali came back from being gone for those 3.5 years? So Oscar Benavena, number 15. Number 14, honorable mention. I'm gonna go with Jimmy Ellis. Again, he was another guy that was hanging on going into the 70s. He was 13-7-1 in this decade. His best win, in my opinion, was the Chavala win. His losses: Frazier, Ali, Shavers, Lau, Bungner, Boone Kirkman. So number 13, I'm gonna go with Leon Spinks. Now we know what his best win is: the Ali win. Then he lost to Ali, and then he got the loss to Jerry Coetzee. So Leon Spinks' best win was Ali. I'll have him honorable mention. I'll have him at number 13. Number 12, Jerry Coetzee, and I actually have him in my top 10 80s. And Jerry Coetzee was solid through the late 70s into the 80s, to the mid 80s. 6'2", 220-pounder. He was 22-1 in the decade. The 2 wins over Kali Konitz, the blowout of Leon Spinks. His losses: 1 loss in the decade, the 15-rounder decision of that vacant title Ali left behind to Big John Tate. So Coetzee, he was very awkward, man. Like, his footwork was all over the place. He would keep his hands down. Then he had like this little Fu Manchu looking mustache going on with the floppy hair. He was just real awkward, man, but he was effective with his awkwardness. The Konitz fight he was very awkward in that fight, and he seemed more to settle down with his style and being more patient, it seemed like, going into the 80s. But he was 22-1 in the 70s. I have him number 12. Number 11. Now, this is the last guy on my honorable mention list, and it was tough between him and the guy I had at number 10, and I debated about this. I actually had him at number 10, and then I switched it back, and then I switched it back, and then I switched it back. I'm going to have Joe Bugner at number 11. 6'4", 230-pounder. He was a big guy, especially for around those days. He was a counter-puncher guy. He wasn't a guy that was coming there and steamroll you. He wanted the counterattack. His best wins: Wepner, Ellis, Jose Luis Garcia, Richard Dunn, Henry Cooper. A lot of people didn't like that one. Mac Foster, Eduardo Corletti. He was probably, you can argue, he was probably the best European heavyweight in the 70s. That's arguable. If somebody said that, I wouldn't mind them saying that. That's arguable that he was. Big guy. His losses: the Ali losses, Frazier, Lau, Middleton, Jack Bodell. You know, like the Frazier fight. You know, people say, "Oh, it's not the same Frazier." Probably wasn't the same Frazier, but Bugner was a hard guy to come in there and just mow down like that. He was just huge. He was a big, huge guy, man. And Frazier can only go so far with his style. You know, Frazier's only 5'10", 205 pounds now. He has mowed guys down, but and you can say it was Frazier, not the same Frazier, but Bugner was, you know, a big guy, man, with good boxing skills. You know, people label him as a bum for some reason during the 70s. He was far from a bum, and I have him probably, if you know, if the next guy is number 10, I would have Bugner probably 10B. You know, but I have him at number 11. All right, then number 10, Big John Tate. Big John Tate was hold on, Bugner. Let me go back to Bugner. His record was 31-6-1 in the decade. So Big John Tate at number 10, 6'4", 230-pounder. His best wins were Dwayne Bobbitt and the Coetzee and the Canoti fight. He didn't lose during the decade. He won a little strap, you know, and we kind of know what happened with John Tate going into the 80s. But for the late 70s, you know, he was a good young up-and-comer, a guy that they thought was going to place Ali and, you know, contend with Holmes and so on and so forth. But I have Big John Tate at number 10. Number 9, and I believe Tate was 20-0 in the decade. At number 9, I'm going to go with Ernie Shavers. He was 47-6-1 in the decade. We all know about his legendary power, man, and even in his losses were probably some of his best performances, like another guy that's in my top 10. But, you know, the 2 losses to Holmes had Holmes hurt in that second fight. I don't know how Holmes got up and recovered. No man should be able to get up from being hit like that and go on to win a fight, let alone get up and survive. The Quarry loss. He lost to Lau. He lost to Bob Stallings. He had to draw with Young. He had knocked Young out. Then Young came back and had to draw with him. Some people thought Young won that fight. His wins, the win over Young, the win over Ellis, Henry Clark, and Ken Norton. At number 8, I'm going to go with Ron Lau. He's probably the biggest overachiever of the decade, in my opinion, man. I just don't know, a guy getting out of jail, man, at, you know, 30 years old, getting out of prison and just deciding to turn pro, you know, and then when he was in prison, got stabbed up, a lot of bad things happened. Just a lot of shit going on in his life, man. And for him to get out and to be a formidable guy like he was and to get wins over Buster Mathis and Jose Luis Garcia and Larry Middleton and Oscar Benavena and Ellis and Shavers and Bugner. You know, we know his losses, Foreman and Ali, and lost to Young twice. He was 37-6 in the decade. I have him at number 8. He had a good jab. He had good boxing skills. He was determined. He wasn't scared of anybody or anything or any circumstances. He had the classic war with Foreman. You know, he was a good, you know, even his loss to Ali, you know, he was in that fight, you know, so I'm going to have Lyle at number 8. Number 7, I'm going to go with Jerry Quarry. Jerry Quarry was tough, man. He was a Frazier type of guy, get right in your chest, you know, get his work in like that. He beat Shavers, he beat Larry Middleton, he beat Lyle and Mac Foster. He lost the 2 losses to Ali and lost to Frazier and Norton. I believe it was the Shavers fight, man. Was it somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was when Corey fought against Shavers. Damn, I can't remember. I think it was when Corey fought against Shavers. Ali had came, you know, when they do the ring introductions and back in the 70s, especially in the 70s and 80s, they will give recognition to fighters that are there in attendance. And lo and behold, this was the fight at MSG. Lo and behold, Ali, Frazier, and Foreman were all there, and Ali's kind of in Frazier's face. Looked like they were about to start. Looked like, you know, they were shadow boxing with each other in the middle of the ring before the fight. It was a really lighthearted moment of the decade for me, and I remember they introduced Foreman, and Foreman tried to just get in there, wave, and try to get out the ring, and then Ali got in his face, shadow boxing. It was a really lighthearted moment of the decade to me, man. But I believe it was the Quarry and Shavers fight that took place. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, man. But believe it was that fight that Ali and Frazier and Foreman were introduced in the ring. But I'm gonna have Corey at number 7. He was really tough. He was 18-4 in the decade. And shit, tell you the truth, man, had Corey been around and really campaigning, he was a guy to me that would have probably done a lot better in the 50s and 60s. But I have at number 7. Number 6, I'm gonna go with Jimmy Young, one of my father's favorite fighters. 6'1", 210-pound guy. He was what they call a cutie, man. He was a real slick boxer. He sent Foreman into retirement, knocked him down, out-fought him, took all his shots, fought him on the ropes, fought him in the middle of the ring. He just out-fought Foreman. The 2 wins over Lau, and, you know, to get knocked out by Shavers and come back and beat him, or to come back and have a draw with him. A lot of people thought he won the fight. You know, then his losses. You know, he's one of those guys where his losses, like the Norton fight, I thought he won the Norton fight, not by a landslide, but I thought he convincingly won that fight. It was competitive, but I thought he convincingly won that fight. I thought he outboxed him. He made him miss. He was doing a lot of things to Norton, you know. Then the fight with Ali, another debatable fight, you know. So those 2 losses were debatable. And then he fought Foreman, he fought Shavers, and I believe he fought all those guys all back to back, if I'm not mistaken. I thought he fought all those guys back to back, but Ossie Casio was a loss he had later on, and, you know, towards the end of the decade. But he was 23-9-1 in the decade. Jimmy Young at number 6. Number 5, who I had down? So number 5, I got Kenny Norton, and I was debating to have Norton or Young at number 5, and I went with Kenny Norton. He was 29-6-1 in the decade. The draw with Minnesota native Scott Ledoux. I believe it was like Norton's 3rd to last fight. His wins over Ali, Young, Bobbitt, Quarry, the comeback win or the avenge from his loss against Jose Luis Garcia. The losses to the Ali, the Foreman knockout when he got knocked out, and Garcia lost the knockout loss, and lost to Holmes. That was debatable. So the Holmes and both Ali losses were all debatable, but they will go down as losses, but they're all debatable. Like I've said, I'm a big Ali fan, and I know a lot of people say that Ali clearly won that second fight. Shit, man, I could probably say Norton probably won all 3, or maybe 2 for Norton and maybe a draw, you know, but however you have it, it's going to go down in history as Ali 2-1 in that rivalry. So he has the 2 losses to Ali, the loss to Holmes, Foreman, Garcia. He was 29-6-1 in the decade. Number 4, I'm going to go with Larry Holmes, 6'3", 215-pounder. He was 32-0 in the decade. The wins over Weaver, Shavers, Evangelista, Roy Williams win, the Norton win. You know, he would get up. Man, I watch his fights, and Howard Cosell would just he hated Larry Holmes, man. Larry Merchant was kind of like that too. They just didn't really think much of Larry Holmes. He was like a watered down version of Ali in their eyes. But if you really sit down and watch him and not think of Ali, which I know is hard to do, but just watch the man fight as a young man, he had a jab, he had heart, he could take a punch, he had a good stinging right hand, he had good footwork. You know, he came in shape. Like I don't know, there was so much hate for him. And I think it's because, you know, it was post getting over Ali, you know what I mean? So, and Ali was kind of on his way out, you know, so I don't know, man. I thought Holmes was a really good fighter, even in the 70s. I have him at number 4. Some people may think I have him really high, but at number 3, I'm going to go with Joe Frazier. He was 8-4 in the decade. The wins over Ali and Ellis, Bugner and Quarry. Then the 2 losses to Foreman and Ali. I don't really think the fight was even necessary for the second Foreman fight. But, you know, Joe, tough man, don't take no for an answer, wanted that comeback. You know, he feels if whoever he's in the ring with, he feels he can beat, man. But really no need for that second fight. There was no way he was ever going to beat George Foreman. The Ali fights, all debatable fights as far as the action in the ring, the back and forth, give and take. You know, so I got Frazier at number 3. Number 2, I'm going to go with Big George Foreman. 32 wins, 2 losses, wins over Chavallo, the destruction of Frazier and Norton, the classic fight with Lau. Then his losses were to sweeties, cuties, you know what I mean? Pure boxers, Ali and Young. Although I thought Ali could stand and fight better than Young could, I thought. But again, Young and Ali are probably the best pure boxers as far as being slick boxers of the 70s. And if you want to say since the 70s, they're probably two of the top 10, you know, in my opinion. Um, as far as styles, not resumes, but just styles, fighting in that style. And well, Ali for resume, but I'm talking about Young. But number one, I'm gonna have Muhammad Ali, 27-3 in a decade. The 3 losses, but he did beat everybody he was in the ring with. The losses to Spinks, Frazier, Norton, all avenged. 2 over Frazier, 2 over Norton. Came back and beat Spinks. And in all these fights, Ali didn't look the same that he did in, you know, the 60s, or it wasn't the same Ali. You know, he had slowed down dramatically and drastically. But it didn't come to a screeching halt because he was still in there beating some of these guys. His wins of the decade, I mean, Norton twice, Foreman, 2 over Frazier, Young, Quarry, Patterson, Chavallo, Benavena, Ellis, Bugner, Lau, Shavers. You know, he was getting hurt. Ali was getting hurt and rocked in some of these fights. Some fights he looked very old, didn't have legs. He would use the high guard. He just didn't look the same, but he was still squeaking out some of these victories. Some of them were debatable, you know, some of them. But I'm going to go with Ali with number 1 of the 70s. That's my top 10, and those are my 10 honorable mentions, and then the 2 amateurs I wanted to highlight of the division for that era. Hope you guys enjoy it, man. If there's anything that you heard that was inaccurate or maybe a stat that was off, please leave it in the comment section. I don't know everything. I did my research, though. But if I have something wrong, or maybe 1 win more or 1 win less, or one loss more or less for somebody, please let me know if you notice anything that I may have said. But that's my list. YTBC. I'm out.